welcome, Nika. Thank you for accepting this little interview slash information about the Roze Umbra grant. It's good to have you.
Thank you.
So yeah, Nika, well, first of all, for those who don't know you, you're an amazing artist and entrepreneur. I actually had moved to Spain to work with you on one of your projects. You're now in Spain in the middle of the national park in this little residency center, retreat center that is very amazing. And you also have generously offered the people that will apply, the winner of the #1 prize and second prize get the chance to go meet you there in the middle of the wilderness to have a retreat where they can practice their art or just relax as well. So that's pretty amazing. Did you have anything you wanted to say to introduce yourself in a more personal way?
Yeah, my background is in visual arts. So I've studied in Montreal and in Berlin in painting, and been working as a visual artist, mostly painting, also sculpture all my life. And most of my project, if not all, in regard to spirituality as well as a topic. And in parallel, I've been studying or practicing various spiritual practices, which have been feeding my art. And since 4 years, or well, 6 years, I've started that project Aurigin, and since 3.5 years, I've been building the place here in Spain, literally building from a ruin to now what is a running place. It's not fully finished yet, but getting there, and starting to host retreats as well as artist residencies with the focus on art and spirituality.
Amazing. Yeah, I remember just going there 2 years ago, how dreamy this place is. Just as you go through the valley, it takes like, 15 minutes by car just to get to the retreat from the entrance of the national park. And you just feel like you're going into on an adventure, which is the feeling that's still open within me from that experience. So I really encourage anyone to go check it out and to apply to the grant, because you can get a chance to go there for free. So I have a few questions that I'm gonna ask all of the jury so that we can start to get an understanding of what this grant is about. The first question I want to ask you is how you define visionary art in your own words, and how is it linked to your own practice?
Well, first of all, I think it's hard to completely define, set boundaries in terms of art, because art should be something that moves boundaries. That being said, visionary art for me is an art that is not concerned in the first place with the art history or art market as the prime objective. So there it would be an art that speaks, is a vehicle to describe spiritual journey, which can be personal, inquisitive, or research based or practice based, as well as experience. But to use the art as a vehicle to express and maybe even demystify what is the spiritual experience and the spiritual development, and then yes, of course, it can take part in the art market and the art history on a professional level, but the main concern is not just creating something new and contemporary, but being as honest as possible in the spiritual research and expression.
That's very beautifully said. I think your art, from having a personal connection to it, because I lived with you and I know it very well, especially the one you did when I was there, but I know that it is a deeply personal and transformative vehicle for you. It's nothing, yes, you are in the market, you have the galleries, but the center as your art, I see them in a same category of a place or a kind of a vehicle for transformation for you, and then now you're hosting people for the same reason, so that they can come and transform through the art in the Aurigin studios and, you know, the nature all around. So I think that's something that is important when discussing visionary art. It's authenticity, and I think you mentioned that in other words as well. To go to the next question, what do you see happening in the contemporary art world? Like some of the biggest challenges you're seeing emerge are exciting evolutions, particularly in the visionary space, but not necessarily just that.
Well, in the last few years, I think there's been a great opening to spiritual art, which was not the case 10 years ago, maybe. And 10 years ago, actually, the fact that spiritual art was a bit taboo in the contemporary art scene was one of the motivators to create the Aurigin Center, in order to create a community of spiritual artists to have a strong voice and claim our place in the art scene as a legitimate and serious endeavor and movement. And I think the biggest catalyst was the exhibition of Hilma of Klint in the Guggenheim in New York. That was a bit like the breaking point. And since then we see much more artists, that either new artists that come up or were discovered, or artists that allow themselves more free expression in the spiritual, with a spiritual discourse, which is very good on one hand. On the other hand, there's maybe a trendification to some extent that can happen, which is not per se negative. I think it still raises awareness, but it would be the same that I would say that it's not only in the art scene, but as well in the wellness scene, where there might be big trends on ayahuasca retreats, for instance, or different practices. And then the question is it really done in a very authentic place with the true spiritual work and path of finding the core of the identity, working in the betterment of the self, or is it bypassing, spiritual bypassing? So I think as much as it can be present in the spiritual development through one example, the ayahuasca retreats, or as well as I think it can be present in the visual arts. That being said, still it opens the door, and this is a pitfall that all artists on that path might fall into in the beginning. So so it opens the door, and then it's okay if it's first maybe the trendiness might drag new people in that awareness of making and appreciating, and for some it might be the seed to go deeper, and if not, it's okay as well. But in that sense, I think there's more and more seeds being planted. Doesn't mean that all the seeds will grow to their fullest potential.
That's beautiful. I think we are very aligned, both of us, and that's why we kind of were magnetically pulled together like a few years ago. I think the vision of what you just said is something Roze Umbra shares very deeply as well. Is like as much as the Aurigin Center and Roze Umbra as a movement is a place to attract the people that are feeling this trend and feeling a calling to do that, but not necessarily have all of the tools, because I think it's easy to fall in the trend, but to actually tap into the potential of the trend is another thing, like you're saying. Like, are you gonna grow from that, or is it just gonna be something that you're imitating because it's trendy? But regardless, like you say, I think what's important is that there is a magnetic pull towards this. That's what's more relevant than the results for now. And this kind of dialogue, I think, is very important that we're having today to share this vision of because I feel the same way about what's going on, the movements. To give people a bit more context, do you want to share a bit about your artistic journey and creative process, how things go and flow from you from the seed all the way to like the actual paintings?
It really depends on the series or the work themselves. Sometimes the series is a bit more thought through in advance. Sometimes there's also plenty of surprises. There, for instance, I'm working on a bigger project of 7 series on the 7 alchemical step of transmutation. So this is very planned in advance. For the next 5 years, I know more or less what I'm gonna work on, but I really don't know how it's gonna look like. And it took me so far, I did the first 2 stages and took more or less a year and a half, 2 years per stage. And the imagery came mostly through meditations. But also it's fed by all of the other influences that I have in the moment. So I have some series. The last series I produced was not from the Alchemical project. It was another glitter painting series I did in Montreal in February. And I didn't have a strong plan for it, and it was much more being in touch with the intuition. Turned out that it was very much aligned with the readings that I was doing at the time, as well as some visions that came through meditation and through a session that I had with Carissa, your partner, which when you and Carissa were here, I had 2 sessions of somatic therapy with Carissa, through which I had tremendous amount of information that came visually, and that became the seed for all the last dissolution series. So it's mainly through meditation, sometimes guided in those cases, sometimes just before the act of painting itself. So yeah, meditation for me is the key. But again, the subject might be fed by the different readings that I'm doing, or in a combination of multiple inputs.
Yeah, it feels also, because Carissa, that she does like somatic therapy, so it feels like these kind of memories, the potential memories, are stored in the body, and then you unlock them in meditation by putting like your cursor in different ways, or just allowing them to open up, or through more active like somatic therapy, which is like more actively doing it. I think that's interesting as a process, because I do sense we all have those kind of memories stored inside of our, it's our karma stored through our body, through our soma. And there is ways to access it, and for you, meditation and these kind of somatic therapies was the solution. For others, it might come through dreams and other techniques like that, lucid dreaming. But it's interesting how I feel like when you get this type of vision, they're so potent, like for exactly who you are. They're the right images that if you, in your case and in my case as well, you express, then they become alive and they become a teacher almost. I don't know if you can relate to that aspect.
100%. I mean, often when I paint, I have an image that comes up, and I try not to judge it and just sketch it and ultimately paint it if I feel that the composition or the image is strong enough. But very often I would figure out the true meaning of what I painted maybe a year later. Sometimes even 5 years later, there's new keys that unlocks. Like recently, there's a series, actually the series which is behind me, there was many keys that unlocked from that series through lectures that I heard from different people, and was linked to physics and the ether, and sometimes it was even in the choice of the titles. In that case, like the choice of the titles of a couple of paintings that were mentioned in some lectures that I heard recently, and it's always very exciting when this happens, and because in the process of painting, I really try as much as possible to put my judgment aside, still have some degree of it in order to keep a flow, an aesthetic line through the series. But just like in the somatic meditation that we did, at first I was not saying what I was seeing because I thought it was just silly images popping in my mind, a bit too sci-fi or fantasy-like, lots of dragons and lightnings and things like that, until I realized that that was the language of my subconscious and that the meaning behind was much greater. And it weaved a very beautiful narrative, but using that very fantastic mystical imagery, which turned out to be maybe the language of my subconscious. And therefore it was really important not to judge the images that came, and understand them as being just my inner language.
And this leads to the next question, because you're describing like how not constricting the information and judging it, letting it be what it is, and letting it open and blossom like a flower almost, because the subconscious talks in symbolism usually, and a symbol is a condensed, packed like bundle of energy. If you constrict it to and judge it, it remains in that form, but you need to allow it to grow within you and to in your environment for it to, have its impact. So what do you think, in your own opinion, like, is the most profound impact visionary art can have on individuals and society?
Well, I think all arts can have great impact, and it's always different. Some people will react to some art more than other. If there is a difference, and the one difference that I can see with visionary art compared to other types of art is what you mentioned before, the honesty and the authenticity. So which I think is the key in the spiritual path itself, is not trying to perform, which is the realm of the ego, of constructing an identity and being that identity in regards to the exterior world, but really trying to find the inner core and express it as openly as possible, potentially unlocking symbols, mysteries, deeper meanings that might relate to everybody, therefore becoming a great teacher, the work being a great teacher, in hopefully in all humility, which is, I think, might be a key quality of the visionary art, the humility. Because if I think of art stars, then it's the celebration of the ego, as opposed to doesn't mean that a great visionary artist cannot become famous, but the intention will not be to make it in order to be famous. That would be a very antithesis, I think, in terms of the dissolution of the self, the surrendering, and becoming a channel for the inspiration and the information to flow. So it's removing the I and then just becoming a tool for the information to flow, which definitely will be tinted by your own personal experiences, life, emotions, knowledge, skills, but still trying not to force in judgment, in relationship, in contradiction, in questioning, just about the one illusion of the art scene, which evolves all the time, and there's new trends anyway and new movements. So it's really just like a dog chasing its tail, as opposed to the visionary art might be more linked with what we can call the outsiders, which I think is funny because today many people claim the title of outsider, while I think it's a bit also an antithesis. Like a true outsider would be somebody who doesn't even claim a title and just does it. But and then you have this in the movement of in the outsiders of the modern times, people, some of my favorite artists are amongst them, and Augustin Lesage, who was a miner, started to paint because he heard one day a voice telling him to buy a canvas and paint, and painted in the dark in his kitchen and made those extremely complex imagery on which there was many hieroglyphs that turned out to be actual hieroglyph from a pyramid, a temple in Egypt that was at the time sealed. So when it got opened up, they realized that he painted exactly what was inside. So this was a very true channeling experience from somebody that didn't have any ambition to be an artist. And his work is very stunning from beauty and complexity and authenticity in that regard. And I think that is a great strength of that visionary.
In a way that it is like a pure in its will. It's like a pure will to create, which is our natural human quality, is the quality of creation. And I think that's valuable what you mentioned for people that will be watching this to see if they should apply or not to the ground. I don't think, like I term visionary ground just so people have something to hold on to, but I do sense, like from talking to lots of emerging artists, I was just in an art residency with lots of emerging artists in New York. There is most of the up and coming artists, from what I've observed, a lot of them are visionary. Most of them just don't know it. They are creating something that is serving a collective purpose, either like helping heal the roots of their ancestries, but they are creating this in a naive way just because they have a strong calling to make art, and the topics that come first is visionary. It's not placed in the bigger picture of things, but in itself it is visionary. So that's why this open call for me was important to do, because the application will require answering a few questions, and hopefully people will find out that their art is visionary by having to answer questions about it, without even having named it that way. But I think to bring that awareness to art creation is also to empower the individual to the potential impact of their work, which can be double-sided, but hopefully can just empower to grow that vision even bigger, and empower the individual to create from this source, which is pure. Especially when you're emerging, you're like finding what it is you can create. So the last question for this part is, and you've mentioned a lot of advice so far, but is there one that comes to mind, advice for emerging visionary artists that you would want to share?
Well, I think it would be twofold. On the one hand, it's always good to practice skills, because the more skills, technical skills you have, and technical mastery, then the less this will come in the way, and then you can just paint without having to think about the technicalities, and then the channel can become more fluid. On the other hand, doing the spiritual work on the side, or the personal research, or the ancestral healing journey, as you just mentioned, and see it and do it in all honesty, and it will feed through the art naturally. So I think these are, like, if you work on both of those aspects simultaneously and separately, they will join and meet up in the artwork and create an artwork that is even more fluid in its expression, and stronger and more healed and concise.
So the second part of this short interview is about the ground more specifically, to help people get to know the judges and what they're looking for, because I think we have 5 juries up to now, and we all have kind of a different background and style, and so this ground aims to support art that resonates beyond the surface aesthetics. So what does this phrase mean to you when you evaluate applications? Art that resonates beyond the surface aesthetics.
I think it will have to be very case by case, but then if the intention is well expressed, again, I don't want to say that the text must perfectly explain the work, because the works are something. If one used visual language, it might be because they're to explain something that cannot be expressed with words. So to just reduce it to the link between the description of the work and the work itself would be reduction. But that being said, if there is a continuity in the research and in the flow. I think that would express some kind of persistence in the research itself. And I'm personally very fond of technical mastery. It doesn't have to be hyper realistic. It can just be a good control of the physical, which can be in a very chaotic abstraction, where there is still the control over matter is shown, but not concise and enclosed by it, so that it becomes very much a language to carry a greater expression, which might be sentimental, which might be a topic of traditions, of spiritual beliefs, of or even a personal vision or experience. I don't know if it's too abstract as an answer.
No, like I think that's the key about visionary art. It is kind of an abstract thing in itself. To even for us jury, like we're gonna have different things to look at, but I think this interview, just the way you describe it and the way all the other jury members will describe it, will start to give people an understanding that it's not linear. It's that's the quality of visionary art for me. It emotes, you know, it's very emotional in its way, but the mastery can inform that. For me, it engages the objective mind and the subjective mind at the same time. That's the way I would describe it. So yeah, I think that answers. When reviewing grant applications, what are the key elements or qualities that truly capture your attention and indicate a strong, impactful project?
I think it was mentioned, but again, I would just highlight the fact that if there is a very deeply explored, if I can sense that there's a deep exploration of one topic, and it's not just on a surface level, or it's just that it, even if it's an emotion or one vision, that there is maybe many iteration of it in order to really reach somebody that did the work, in order to really find the seed and the source, and maybe with different declination of it doesn't have to be only in one medium, it can be in multiple mediums. But there is definitely some kind of devotion, just as a spiritual devotion to a technique, that I could feel that there is some kind of devotion in the work. I think that shines, and also if I notice personally, which again will be, all my judgment will be biased with my personal experience and tastes, but as much as possible, if I can try to be objective, or it will be difficult or impossible, but if I can feel that it's very, very authentic and not just trying to be something, and if I feel that it is a work that is that lacks genuine expression and really just tries to be in the taste of the moment, I think this doesn't mean that you cannot be inspired. There's a difference between trying to copy or being inspired by. And I think this can be very felt. It's the subtlety of the authenticity. And it's okay to recognize the influences through a work. But if I see that it's just another iteration of something well known, for me personally, it might not be as interesting. Not because it doesn't mean that it's authentic, but because it also expresses a lack of willingness to break our own boundaries and go beyond our inspirations and create and actually propose something that is a bit fresh without falling into the trap to just try to make something new. So remaining authentic, acknowledging our influences without copying them, and while having an openness for an awareness of what was in order to create something new, while having an openness to what comes and from within and without.
Yeah, the whole Roze Umbra movement, the rose is the heart, and for me, you said devotion, you said authenticity. This is qualities of the rose, of the heart, because when it's heart-centered, it will be authentic, it will be resonant, and it will be like unique to your own soul, and that is kind of the whole idea of this grant. So I think you said it very well. So Is there any common pitfalls or things applicants often miss that you would advise them to pay close attention to in their submission?
Maybe in the text it would be that not trying to overly complicate the concept in order to justify one's position, because again I think that the art can speak of it by itself, but it would be more for me interesting to read something that supports the artwork by giving me a context. It might be also personal, it might be about an experience, also maybe mentioning a few inspirations, and in order to give me a context rather than fully trying to describe the image that I'm looking at. I think that would be giving me a tone, an undertone, in order to appreciate the work by itself, rather than just trying to decorticate and explain the work, which should speak by itself in some way.
Next question. What do you hope to see the recipients of the Visionary Rose Grant achieve with this support, and what kind of impact do you envision their projects having?
Well, I hope that as your project in general is building up a community, so no matter the outcome, I think just by being part of that project and that open call creates a momentum and to gather people. And then maybe also by engaging in the comments or on the social media or platform that you will put in place, will generate this sense of community, which I think is very important, and dialogue between artists in order to find solutions to bring this your own art as well as the movement in general of art and spirituality and willingness to use art as a vehicle of growth. So that alone can be very good. And then, of course, the different acknowledgement prizes and gifts in itself are fun to have, great to receive, good for the acknowledgement. If you come here and in the Aurigin Center, then it's a beautiful place as well to create, and I will be happy to welcome you. But I think first and foremost, the biggest takeaway is joining a movement.
That's beautiful. Yeah, it is. That's a very good point. Like, regardless of all the prizes, just to see that you're part of a bigger collective movement, that for me is about like rebalancing almost the inequalities in the human psyche, the collective psyche. Everyone has their role to play, and then I feel like the more the community becomes larger, the more we see these bigger trends that we are all part of, and it creates a bigger kind of a solidarity kind of movement. As for me, it's important that people know that they are individuals, but that because they're individuals, they're part of a bigger ecosystem, and that's kind of that's beautiful that you're highlighting this. And last question. Is there a last message you would like to share with artists who are considering applying for the Visionary Rose Grant?
Yes, I think as artists it's as much important to work on yourself, work on your art, as much as to put yourself out there and meet people. And I think this is a beautiful initiative that you put out there. And in order to start forming, building up that collective group of like-minded artists who are maybe there is thousands and thousands of artists out there, and there's already many ways to create a community also through schools but sometimes what I hope that this movement might become is that it's not about competition, but it's more about creating that unity feeling. And then maybe engaging, finding solution how people can self-organized and organize exhibitions or online content community in order to bring visionary art forward and share it, because I think this is again, to the description of visionary art, the main purpose might be as much as possible egoless, and really for the sake of creation as a process for the individual while sharing it. and sharing it not to compete or not sharing it to promote the self, but really with the willingness to share beauty, share wisdom, share love, share insights, and therefore with that willingness to share, I think the community building aspect is very important, and that alone should be a good reason to engage and be part of that.
And from my observation also, when you start sharing something that's authentic, you start seeing that your creation becomes someone's like medicine, you know. The more authentic, it's almost like we have a unique medicine that will serve the collective, and when we are genuine with it and authentic, and that's what we'll be looking for in these applications, it creates a beautiful, delicate medicine that is going to serve a few people, like, you know, unique people that's going to see it. It's not going to serve like a, you know, general pharma that's one medicine for like the whole population. No, like your product is specific to someone at a specific time and space, and because it's authentic, it resonates and attracts the right people, and I think it creates this big web of meaning and of healing, which is the, you know, the overarching theme of Roze Umbra, is to healing the world through creation. So I think this wraps everything very well, and I'm very excited to film a podcast, and we have different conversations about having an ongoing also discussion. Very excited for that, because I think we do share similar vision, and we have different angles on different topics, and I think I'm excited to have you on my own platform, but also to be part of your platform eventually, so we can.
Yeah. It's coming soon. There had been so much physical work on the house that has been impairing the development of that other project, that it's getting there, almost not done, but the house is getting ready. Hopefully by September the art studios will be ready, and I can go to the next chapter.
Yeah, that's cool. So thank you so much for taking time to do this little interview. I will be publishing this in little sequences throughout until the end of the application. So thank you for partaking in this, and for your insights for people applying as well.
Well, thank you very much.